more evil.
Yeah, you know, I meant to actually follow up on the what the gentleman over here was saying, and so I appreciate the opportunity because it's very important. And you know, you're absolutely right in terms of slavery in particular. It's very interesting, and I wrote about this at some length in a book, but I'm not advertising, so I'm not even going to tell you which book it was. But I thought that this was a matter of very great import, and that's all I'm trying to convey to you by saying that. That the South, the Southern Americans, the Confederacy, they had all sorts of, of course, it was a very Christian area, and they had all sorts of Christian exegetes reading the Bible and justifying slavery from it. Now, what's interesting about that is that the North also had lots of Christian exegetes. They were also Christians. And their Christian exegetes were saying that slavery was wrong. And it's very interesting because if you take the Bible at the face value in terms of what it says about slavery, completely justified. And the people in the North who were the abolitionist leaders, like William Lloyd Garrison, notably, who was a Christian preacher, he knew that. He had the same Bible. But what he argued against that was that the Jewish and Christian principle of the equality of dignity of all human beings was of greater import than what was said about slavery, and ultimately had to take precedence over it, such that slavery would have to be abolished in order to fully embody this principle of the equality of dignity of all human beings. And so he was arguing not by stepping outside of the Christian tradition, but he was arguing from within the Christian tradition, oh yeah, look it up, and using other aspects of the Christian tradition in order to argue against slavery. But undeniably, slavery is in the Bible and it's justified in there and so on. Now, if there were Muslims who argued within the Quran and Islam that jihad warfare is not to be pursued against unbelievers, that Muslims should coexist with unbelievers in a society that does not establish Islamic law as normative, and that they should coexist peacefully with those unbelievers as equals on an indefinite basis under this secular system, then that would be something most urgently to be supported. And if anybody ever finds somebody like that, then I would give that person unqualified support. And if you want to show me anybody like that, I'll be glad to take a look. But there actually no such people exist. Yes?
You spoke at length about Adhima, the pact of protection. And you mentioned a lot that historical context is very important in considering these things. However, in the historical context that Islam arose, for instance, a lot of the laws of the Dhimma were actually taken from Byzantine laws governing the Jews. And as well, if you look at the laws governing the control and the jurisprudence of Jews in Western Europe, the Dhimma was actually rather attractive. Jews in Western Europe were literally sold as slaves and were pretty much property. They were expelled from and this isn't in all Catholic countries. Poland, for instance, showed remarkable tolerance to the Jews. And actually when the Crusaders came to the Middle East, you might be surprised to know, I actually believe that the Crusades have been, as you do, overblown, and that they weren't quite as bad as portrayed. But recently a book came out called Rough Tolerance that talked about the jurisprudence and the governing of Muslims in Outre-mer. Is that how you say it, over the sea in the French?
Yeah.
Outre-mer. The kingdoms, the Latin kingdoms in Lebanon and Jerusalem. And it said that when the Crusaders came to the Middle East, the basic governance they adopted for controlling the Muslims was actually something based on the Dhimma. The Muslims became Dhimmiyin, the Dhimmis, and the Christians were now the masters. And you in your own book, The Politically Correct Guide to Islam and the Crusades, you mentioned that a Muslim traveler came through and said that the Muslims in this area were treated rather well. But they were under basically the same system that they had the Christians under.
Actually, that's not what he said.
So he said that they prosper here and that the Franks govern them very well. And
no, that's not what he said. What did he say?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay, what he said was that how terrible it was. This is a Muslim chronicler, a contemporary of the Crusaders, who was there. And he said it was a shame that the Muslims preferred to live in the Crusader lands rather than in the Muslim land.
Yeah.
And they had life better there.
And they were living...
He said it. I didn't say it. I quoted it.
I agree. And they were living under a system that was basically a dhimma.
Yeah.
They were living under a Christian dhimma.
Uh-huh.
So you say that historical context needs to be considered, but for the time, a dhimma seems... It was rather remarkably tolerant to a lot of the regimes that were in, for instance, France and Germany.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You're agreeing?
Yeah. And I'll tell you something else, too. What the Crusaders did to the Jews in Eastern Europe and in Jerusalem was heinous. In the history of Christian anti-Semitism, it's heinous and inexcusable. And I'm not defending it. And if anybody ever wants to revive those laws, I'll oppose them. But nobody is. The only laws anybody's trying to revive are the laws of the Islamic Zumma, or Dhimma. The only ones. And so I'm opposing them, and you ought to too, in the name of human rights. Historical analogies of how people had it worse here or worse there, that's bad. History, is full of Dylans. And it's a shame. And nobody's record is spotless. But as long as there's no chance that anybody is trying to revive those laws, then they are just a matter of historical record. It's also a matter of historical record. And I will close my answer to you with this, that the Jews at the dawn of the 20th century, people tend to vote with their feet when they can. And there were 1 million Jews in Islamic lands at the dawn of the 20th century, and 16 million in Europe. And so somehow they must have gotten the idea that things were better in Europe. Yes, Eric?
Well, Mr. Spencer, I get the impression of your talking, it could be that my history is skewed or biased, but that the depredations that we typically find in the Christian world justified by scriptural texts tend to be post facto interpretations which are come up with centuries after the founding of the religion, whereas if I get the impression correctly, the barbarities that we associate with Sharia and Jihad were with Islam from the get-go. Am I wrong in deriving that conclusion?
No, you're quite right. You're quite right. If insofar as these teachings, the lady left, but the idea that these things are, these interpretations of the Quran and Islam are somehow my inventions, or that I found some villainous scholars to back me up or something like that. Look it up. Look it up for yourselves. Disprove me. I'm ready. I'd be happy to cut this out and, go play the saxophone. I don't need to do this. This is crazy. If the house weren't on fire, though, there wouldn't be any need to put it out. Yes, sir?
If you think this is, if I'm hearing you correctly, then you think the option is either between being a non-committed Muslim, a committed Muslim, or a reformist who doesn't have a chance. What do you think? What do you think should happen? Like, what would you like to see?
Well, it would be great if the reformers had a chance. I think we have to be realistic about their chances. The gate of Ijtihad has been closed for 1,000 years. Ijtihad is independent reasoning on the legal sources of Islam. And it's not considered to be legitimate, for the most part. There are people who are doing it. But it's not considered to be legitimate by the authorities who need to consider it legitimate if they're going to succeed, ultimately. And so, is that an insurmountable obstacle? I hope not. But I'm not going to kid myself and think that the doctrines of jihad and Islamic supremacism are going to disappear tomorrow or in any time in my lifetime. They're too old and too entrenched. And so what we need to do, I think, in the first place, is while giving genuine and wholehearted support to any genuine and sincere Islamic reformer, at the same time, we have to understand what's at stake. And that's what I'm trying to frame here today. That what's at stake are basic notions of human rights that make life better for Muslims and non-Muslims. And we need to frame the debate in terms of those rights and call upon people to understand what's at stake and to defend them. And that will take a comprehensive defense. I think that the idea of democratizing Iraq and Afghanistan was foredoomed. I always opposed it. And it did not take into account the realities of the adherence to Sharia as a political system that would be found in both of those countries. And so we need to understand that realistically and deal with this as an ideological challenge and face it ideologically. As well as, of course, maintaining law enforcement efforts to root out violent terrorists and violent Islamic supremacists and so on.